telling them. All of this took place before we knew about the assassination in Canada. So the assassination in Canada really adds a whole new context to it, and you would have seen by the dates that Avtar's death occurred 3 days before the assassination in British Columbia. This is a poster in relation to those who died around the same time, or killed around the same time. We've got, of course, Avtar in the UK, Harmeet Singh in Pakistan, which was a few years earlier, Parmjit Singh Panwar in Pakistan, which was around within a few weeks of his other killings, and Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, which happened 3 days after Avtar's death. Go to the next slide, please. This Avtar's death comes in the context of transnational repression. In relation to transnational repression, there's a list of a number of Sikh activists around the world, including countries such as Italy, other places in Europe as well, where there's been suspicious deaths quite recently. The FBI in the United States has gone around warning Sikh leaders there that their lives could be in danger. So what we're saying today is, when you look at the context of this, it means that Avtar's death, at the very least, is suspicious because of these warnings which are going out to Sikh communities around the world. We're not aware of any warnings going out to the Sikh community in the United Kingdom from the British authorities. Oh, yes, if we can just play this video. If you bear with me one moment. There's an important video that we've translated I'd like to play, if possible, for you. Ready to play. So you would have seen on the video in the blue turban was Avtar there, and this is Indian press reporting about a Indian intelligence hit list of Sikhs living abroad, and then we've obviously now we know about the execution in Canada as well as potential executions in Pakistan and further ones around Europe as well. No post-mortem was carried out on Avtar's body, which is very unusual in this case. It was a failure there, we would say, and the West Midlands Police failed to take any witness statements from any of his friends, which is probably the first investigative step you take in relation to a case like this. His death was not in isolation, of course. You must take into account the fact that there were Indian threats against him, and also in the context of his position as an activist in the Sikh community. Information from the mortuary was that the National Crime Agency were initially interested in the body and told everyone not to have any access to it, but then they were told at the mortuary there was not going to be any investigation. So we say that in this case, really, the investigation should have been properly carried out. Go to the next slide. So here are the sorry about that. No, you're right. What we'll be looking at next is in relation to the criteria for inquest in English law. And the main criteria is that the coroner has reason to suspect that the deceased died a violent or unnatural death. The cause of death is unknown. So that's what the criteria for establishing an inquest is. It will show on the screen in just one moment as well. And the purpose of an inquest is to determine how, when and where the deceased came to their death. When Article 2 of the European Convention is engaged, that's the right to life. The question of how is extended to mean under what circumstances. If you just jump forward to the legal slide, that's the one there. The coroner can come under the duty to make recommendations to prevent future deaths, and there are positive obligations under Article 2. So one of the questions will be for the coroner or the chair of an inquiry, did the British security establishment put in place provisions to protect the Sikh community when there was a lot of evidence in relation to threats to them? This morning we have made a request to the Chief Coroner. The Chief Coroner is quite a new position in England and Wales, and the Chief Coroner oversees the whole coronial processes. We've made an application under Section 3 for him to direct a senior coroner to conduct an investigation. What we say should be done is that a different coroner should be appointed to be the coroner in this case for a number of reasons, and that coroner should be appointed as a High Court judge or retired High Court judge. Under the provisions, under legal provisions, the Chief Coroner can ask the Lord Chief Justice to appoint an ex-High Court judge or a current High Court judge to conduct an inquest. The reason why this is very important for it to be a judge conducting this particular inquest rather than a coroner is where there is evidence which may be heard in camera, so evidence from the security services which can't be heard publicly, inquests can't hear that evidence because everything in an inquest must be done publicly. So the provisions of the law mean that when you come across evidence which can't be given publicly, it should be changed or morphed into an inquiry, which is what happened in the Litvinenko inquest, which turned into an inquiry because the inquiry was to hear evidence about Russian state responsibility from the security services. So that's why we say it's very important that the senior judge is appointed at this point, so that person can carry out the proceedings from it being an inquest into it turning into an inquiry. In this case, there is bound to be evidence from our Five Eyes partners from Canada, from the US, from Australia, about what's happening in regards to Sikh communities in their countries, which will be relevant to the questions that this inquest and inquiry will have to answer. And that evidence, of course, the Department of Intelligence agencies won't want to give this publicly, or won't be able to give this publicly. Therefore, this inquest needs to turn into an inquiry at some point. But the first step is for the Chief Coroner to order an inquest. I look here a little bit about the procedural and substantive duties. Under English law, taking into account the European Convention, Article 2, the right to life, there's a procedural duty to carry out a proper investigation. In this case, a proper investigation has not been carried out, given all the circumstances behind it. There is also a substantive operational duty to protect people who are in danger. And we'd say in this case, one of the questions for the coroner and for the eventual inquiry will be, has that protection been put in place for Avtar and for the Sikh community? Here I just cover the way that inquests move into inquiry. This was the Alexander Litvinenko case, which went from an inquest into an inquiry for the obvious reasons that I explained to you. So in short, what we're saying here is there's a death in highly suspicious circumstances. Given what we now know about what happened in Canada and other deaths of Sikh activists around the world, we say that this, at the very least, there is suspicion that he died in suspicious circumstances. So an inquest must be opened in this case. There is no other answer to it. And we say that a judge should be appointed to run that inquest so that when it eventually turns into an inquiry to hear evidence in camera, it can do so. And we say it's very important for the Sikh community to know that when there are suspicious deaths in their community, that they will be protected and that a proper investigation will be carried out. I'll answer some questions at the end. I might hand over to some of my other panelists.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think I'll thank Michael at Church Court Chambers for assisting the family and the community on this case. The death of Avtar Singh Khanda sent shockwaves through not only the community in the UK but worldwide. He was a much loved individual. He was very well respected and very much looked up to. He, as Michael mentioned, his family was sort of covered with tragedy. In the very short after his mum and father were married, his father was kidnapped in Punjab, tortured, and then disappeared and killed by the Punjab police in the thousands of fake encounters that were happening in the 90s. The mother was never even given the body back of his father, which was a complete tragedy. She was just told that your husband is gone. Avtar, being 3 years old, and his sister, just a few months old, were raised. Other family members were abducted, tortured, and killed. That was his life, that's what he saw. Up to the age of 10, the family continued to be harassed, and the mother sought refuge for her only son by sending him to the UK, where he could be free and continue his education, his life. Avtar, once he came to the United Kingdom, obviously he followed in his father's footsteps around becoming an activist himself. He'd seen the troubles in the Punjab, he knew his history, and he's continued to be active, connected with a lot of the organisations in the UK. And as I said, he was a very friendly face, and was known even more, became more popular when he became the face and a presenter on a popular Sikh channel. So for him to have such widespread connections and love, you could say, the news of him being ill initially was one that was very shocking. I think most in the community had met him the weekend before, which was Sunday the 4th of June, at Trafalgar Square in London, at the remembrance of the 1984 rally, and he was in very good health. We spoke personally for about an hour and a half at that time, and he didn't complain about any issues, any ailments. We talked about what was happening in Punjab, we talked about the future strategy, we talked about future plans that he was thinking, and then to receive a phone call a few days later that he was ill and was serious was a shock, because I've never even heard Avtar be unwell, to the fact that he never even had a medical doctor or GP in this country for the 10 years he was living here. We then learnt of his condition from the doctor, and it was surprising because Avtar was still in very good spirits. And I know Amritpal, who visited and saw him, will touch on that. But essentially, the doctor's summary, the doctors were not concerned of the AML that they had identified through their tests. They said it was treatable, and there was a very good chance, very high chance of recovery from AML. Within 24 hours, he deteriorated rapidly. Even the hospital had made plans to move him, or they'd been requested to move him to Queen's Hospital. And suddenly, within an hour or two, Birmingham City Hospital made the decision to put him on a ventilator and induce coma, which was bizarre because he was in bed talking to friends and relatives literally minutes before that decision was made. Nevertheless, they made the decision, and on the Wednesday afternoon and on a Wednesday late night, he went into cardiac arrest, and on Thursday morning, they pronounced him deceased. Now, all of that news was out in the Indian media before the family or anyone else knew what was going on. Now, there was a huge suspicion around Avtar's deterioration, sudden illness, and then death, given that the Indian media had made him enemy number one, basically labelled him a terrorist. And it's important to note there was no charge, no criminal file, an FIR, no warrant for Avtar's arrest pending or outstanding in India. He had no criminal record in this country. He was not involved in any incident on the 19th of March. That was confirmed by the Met Police. Yet the Indian media, the Indian government continued to demonise him, label him falsely as the ringleader, as a terrorist, knowing full well he had nothing to do with this event. And they completely misused the incident to target Avtar specifically. It's like they put a target on his back and said, "We're going after you." They had raised the case of Avtar with the British government. So we know they'd raised the issue of the flag incident with the British government and made it into a diplomatic incident. So the British government were aware. At the same time, Avtar has been run in the media as the culprit, as the ringleader of all of this. Avtar then received phone calls from India, and he repeated exactly the conversation to me. His mother and his sister were harassed, taken into the police custody every day for a few days. And a senior inspector, female officer, called Avtar on his mobile. And I'll paraphrase, and the recording is available, we'll share that in due course. "We have you, Avtar, you know what you've done. We're on to you. We've got your sister and your mother in custody. You know what we're capable of. I suggest you tell us what we want to know." And what they were referring to was the whereabouts of Amritpal, who was wanted by the Indian authorities at the time. And they were asking Avtar, who's in London, where he was. And Avtar responded to the threat saying, "Look, you've done plenty of damage to my family. What more can you do? I don't know anything." But that toll on him was huge. So to date of him being unwell from March all the way to him going to hospital, I had it confirmed that Avtar did not receive any phone calls from either the Met, West Midlands Police, or any of the intelligence services to say your life may be under threat, you are being inappropriately and incorrectly being targeted. We might need to offer you some protection, or you may want to look at some protection for yourself. At no point were any warnings given to him, which was bizarre. And then I guess what made things even worse was post his death, the suspicious nature of it, and the rapid decline of Avtar to his ultimate demise was raised with the police, West Midlands Police, it was raised with his politicians, and it was raised with the coroner. That this is highly suspicious. The doctors were aware that there is a suspicion of poisoning when he was unwell. They had conducted various tests, and as Mike mentioned, the National Crime Agency had informed the hospital that they would want the body to be secured and not be contaminated with ahead of an investigation. Situation went completely sort of U-turn a few days later when the coroner refused even to do an autopsy and therefore stopped communicating with the family, showed no empathy, no understanding, no acknowledgement of any context of what was going on with Bhai Avtar. And then you have the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar on the 18th of June, which changed the dynamic completely in the whole community. And people were convinced that both had been eliminated because the Indian media, and I'd say the equivalent of the media partners that are here today, not some obscure online journalists, these were mainstream Indian media channels, were calling and celebrating the elimination. Celebrating the death of a 35-year-old who had no criminal record, not committed any crimes, was not wanted in connection with anything other than the Indians didn't like him and made a target of him, and ultimately he died. So the British police, the coroner, Birmingham and Solihull coroner, and the hospital continued then to completely ignore the family, ignore their need, their pain, and neglect their duty of care not only to Avtar but to the family and to the community as a whole. And that's partly the case for the request for a full inquest. They not only failed to do their duty in a post-mortem and inquest, but they placed every obstacle imaginable in the family and the community doing a private autopsy. And that included refusing access to the body. When a private pathologist was sourced, they then, without telling anybody, moved the body into a freezer, therefore meaning the body would have to defrost for 5 days before any autopsy could be done. And all of this extended over a month into the body then decomposing and losing any potential evidence. And all these obstacles caused huge distress to the family and the community. And at a time where we needed certainty and reassurance to say Avtar's died of natural causes if that was the case, and we've done every test possible, and we reassure the community that you're not under threat or you're not under risk by any foreign agent, they did the complete opposite and have done so to date. And the inquest request really underlines that there is huge amount of suspicion to this case and untold answers here which we need questions we need answers to. The final thing I'd like to highlight was following Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination and the revelations by Justin Trudeau 2 weeks ago today, the Indian authorities have continued to issue hit lists of activists around the world. 6 of them live in the UK. One of them, who was covered in the media, was tortured himself in the late 90s and early 2000s, and his name, his picture, his details were put on mainstream media in India. There are many young activists in the community who have been born here, educated here, work in this country, contribute to the society, and follow not only our faith, what it teaches about standing up against oppression and fighting injustice, but also our duty, which corresponds with British values, speaking the truth, seeking justice. And there has been zero outreach by any of the law enforcement authorities or the government following the revelations that Sikh activists have been targeted and have been on watch lists and on hit lists. I think the community have a huge apprehension and concern now that our government is ignoring the welfare of its own citizens and due to the appeasement of the Indian government.
Shall I just pick off where Chaz has left it?
Excuse me, sir. Could you slide the microphone on the desk? Yeah, just slide the whole thing across. Yeah, thank you.
So just picking up where Chaz left off, I want to take you back to Narendra Modi coming to power in 2014 and appointing his right-hand man as Ajit Doval, basically the head of Indian intelligence. The next thing you find where Avtar Singh Khanda's name comes up is in November 2015 when Narendra Modi made his first visit to the UK as Prime Minister. He met David Cameron, and I was just Googling specifically, Narendra Modi left a dossier with David Cameron, Avtar Singh Khanda's name is there. It was reported widely in the Indian media. The reason why I wanted to start there is the way Britain operates and the way India operates are two entirely different things. Britain, everything is very secretive. Everything is quite diplomacy. But in India, it appears that the Indian media is used as a mouthpiece for the Indian authorities. And therefore, when national journalists asked David Cameron number 10 about the dossier, they said it doesn't exist. Whereas the Indian media's not just got the dossier, it's naming individuals, naming towns, naming Glasgow. This is important. 2015, 2 years before Jagtar Singh Johal gets picked up. I want to fast forward. Remember that context, that actually Narendra Modi and Ajit Pai had been raising these issues more or less since they came to power with the British government. Fast forward to this year. What Jazz referred to as the threats that Avtar Singh Khanda was receiving really started before the 19th of March in the context of Bhai Avtar Singh. So if you think about this, what happened? On the 18th of March, 1,000 Sikh activists get arrested, picked up across Punjab in the hope to arrest Bhai Avtar Singh. The disappointing thing from an Indian government's perspective, they don't catch him. He gets away. And they know that Avtar Singh Khanda is a close associate. Not many of you will know that his wife, who is from Wolverhampton, this is the wife of Bhai Avtar Singh. Avtar Singh Khanda was the one who arranged their marriage. So what followed, the flag incident, which happened the day after, in response to 1,000 people picked up, is he was being, because it was embarrassing for the Indian authorities, you know, the amount of police and paramilitary they used, the number of people they picked up, and he got away. In the end, Bhai Avtar gave himself up about 4 weeks later. But the point was, he was under pressure directly, as we've heard, through those phone calls from Indian police threatening him, his mother and sister picked up. Now comes the flag incident. Flag incident happens on the 19th of March. About 40 to 50 protesters. In fact, if you go by the National Investigation Agency of India, they published the photographs of 45 individuals. Michael showed the photograph of 5 of them. Those photographs are on the NI India Twitter handle from the 14th of June. None of the 45 have a passing home. So this story about him being arrested because of the flag incident was all false. There was one person arrested, and clearly the police have a job to do, there's a law and order issue, and that's been the line. But what actually happened? The British High Commissioner was summoned following that incident. His security was taken away. That's the way India reacted. Then they sent their NIA team in April. Now, I'm not going to repeat what's already been said, but the NIA, when they put out those still photographs of protesters, it's, as Michael said, it's not illegal to protest in London. If you break the law, you'll get arrested. And clearly one person was arrested for taking it down. But the point was, the counter-terrorism officers, we had a meeting with them on the 27th of June. This was after Avtar Singh Khanda passed away, after Deep Singh Nijjar had been assassinated. And this was not just the Met Police, it was the West Midlands Police, a number of the police forces, and they were talking about their concerns about the NIA. Were they involved in criminal activity in the UK by putting out those photos, that video footage? Because actually, it's not what you expect a foreign power to do in this country. Now, lots of questions like, why are you interested in Avtar Singh Khanda? Because people thought he might have died of natural causes. Things changed. So 2 weeks today, when Justin Trudeau stood up in Parliament and made those accusations, what's happened in the last 2 weeks, the amount of interest around what happened to Avtar Singh Khanda, what the British authorities knew when he was getting threats. Anyone that knows how the intelligence services operate with Five Eyes will know, they will know who was threatening him, when he was being threatened. So even though we can share with you, the threats he had, the intelligence service's job is to monitor, to make sure people in this country are not threatened, especially by foreign powers. Now, if they had that intelligence, why was there nothing done to warn Avtar Singh? There were things in the media, as we've seen. He's been on their radar since 2015. So what you've got is you've got a situation whereby in the last 2 weeks, hand on my heart, several sources have told us that they've spoken to people in British intelligence who say there's been foul play when it comes to passing. Now, we don't know what that intelligence is, but the Americans probably have it, the Canadians probably have it, Australians and New Zealand, they will have it. Now, the UK government may have vested interest as to why they don't want the same scenario as Canada. Free trade deal, politics here is very different. And the way the UK always operates is this quiet diplomacy, which is actually what Justin Trudeau tried to do in the visits of the National Security Advisor in August and September before he went public. So that context is really important because what Jazz talked about, the hit list that came on 10th of July, those 20 people, that video you saw. What we believe is the UK government did take this up with the Indian government because they were getting noise from the police saying the NNI are doing things there they shouldn't. They were putting out a hit list naming 6 individuals from the UK, their photographs and names. And also, and I think this is an important thing that's lost in this video, saying these people have been killed, including Avtar Singh Khanda. This isn't, Sikh community making this up. This is reputable television channel, Ajtak, talking about what the NIA have told them. Now, I'll probably leave it there because I think there are so many questions here for what intelligence services knew, quite separate from what West Midlands Police did or didn't do, what the coroner did or did not do. And actually, given the context of what Justin Trudeau said, and given the Five Eyes and how they operate and what we've been told, it's a gathering and sharing mechanism when it comes to India. All 5 countries will have access to exactly what Justin Trudeau's got access to, and in theory, the Americans and the other country will have access to what the British intelligence had, not just about what happened to the Deep Sea Ninja, but more so what happened to Avtar Singh Khanda. And clearly, we won't even go into the other killings that have taken place, but there's been so much speculation about has Ajit Dilbar, who apparently took real personal offence to the lowering of the flag on the 19th of March, resorted to tactics which has resulted in 2 assassinations, 6th of May, 18th of June, and arguably the killing of Avtar Singh Khanda on 15th of June.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah, thank you once again. No worries. If you could just slide in as much as you can, sir, just for the angle for the cameras. Thank you.
I think for myself, I'm not going to claim to be a close associate of Avtar. We spoke, he confided in me, we used to agree and disagree on many occasions. I remember, I'm going to mention 2 incidents now, which for me raises doubt on his passing away. When the incident of Avtar Singh happened in India, I saw an Avtar that was sad, that couldn't speak, that was lonely, that was quiet. On one occasion I spoke to him and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said to me, "Nobody is speaking my story." So I asked you, will you cover his story? And I said to him, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I had an interview with a reputable India media. We spoke for an hour, but they decided not to play my story." And I said, "What was your story?" and he said I wanted to give a response back to me not being involved in the flag being taken down from the High Commission, and wanted to give my account of my life. At that time I spoke to a reputable British media company, I won't say the name today, and we arranged for an interview for him. Unfortunately, they agreed and then chose not to follow that up. So I remember Avtar as someone who had a story, but nobody wanted to cover that story. Later on, I was meant to go see him in hospital. I didn't believe anything happened to him. They said to me, he's got cancer. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Days went on, I'd met him on the Saturday. We spoke again, he was sad, he was quiet. I was meant to meet him on the Thursday morning. We had arranged for a meeting with the hospital staff so I could understand what had actually happened because I'm a pharmacist. And behold, yes, he passed away. I found out in the morning. Later that day, obviously there were many people that were saying, oh, he might have been assassinated. I was like, I don't believe that can actually happen here in England, right? The following day, we had the West Midlands Police. So they came. We sat down with them. They said they came on behalf of the coroner. We spoke to them for 2 hours, gave an account of what had happened over the last few years with Avtar, gave evidence, gave news reports. Then we went to see the body. We were refused because at that time we were told the body is being taken away now. It's going to be sealed because an investigation will be conducted. Only a few hours after that, we had a phone call from the police. Oh, we've done our investigation, and that has now gone to the coroner. So my question is, an investigation that lasted a mere 6 hours, 10 hours max. At that point, I did question, what was that investigation? From myself, and from the family, from the Sikh community, I would say more could be done, and may this inquest bring out everything that there is to do with this case.
Thank you very much. We're willing to take questions either online or in person. I don't know if anyone in the room's got any questions to start with. Yes, please.
Hi, Sikanda from Channel 4 News. I just wanted to check, you were saying that Avtar was doing quite well initially in hospital. Did he himself then ever express concern in the hours or days before he passed away that he had been poisoned or targeted?
Just the microphone as well.
Once Avtar had been admitted into hospital, his next of kin, his friends, close loved ones visited him, and he was under no idea that he had days to live or hours to live at that point. It was a case of, yeah, whatever. He didn't understand what was wrong with him, but he understood he was in the hospital, and there was many doctors looking at him, and they were giving him medication, and he was making plans of what he would do. It wasn't really till, well, actually, even on the Wednesday, where he recorded his last voice message before they were inducing him in a coma. Even at that stage, he told us, don't worry, I'll be back in a few hours. And then it was his friends who said, no, what they're going to do is induce you into a coma, and you might be under for a few days. And then he said, well, let me record a message for everybody. And that message was for everyone to remain in high spirits. He's in high spirits, for everyone to follow the will of Waheguru, the Creator, and to keep dedicated to the cause, to the community, to the nation. And he basically wished the best for everybody, all humanity. And that was his last words. And again, I think everyone around him still expected him to just come out of that cycle, get his breathing back, oxygen back where it needs to be, and then you take it on to the next stage.
But so far, you haven't been able to identify any kind of suspicious interaction in the days preceding him becoming ill. Is that
nothing that
right?
stood out?
The only thing that did come up was obviously talking to friends, people he lived with, did talk about, probably about a week before, that he was getting very breathless. So Avtar never had a GP, didn't go to the doctors. First he was into hospital and went to the gym. So there was something clearly happening before that. But to be honest, you know, who sitting here in Britain would be thinking Avtar would become a potential target for poisoning? I think now that's a much bigger possibility. Perhaps it wasn't something that ordinary people would think could happen. So there's definitely something, and that's why, you know, the authorities there should have probably at least carried out an autopsy, because that's been the reaction from people. What? There's no autopsy. Why? Look at all the circumstances.
It's surprising in this case that there hasn't been a proper investigation by West Midlands Police. They didn't speak to his friends and colleagues or workmates, and that's the first thing you do to see who was in contact with him, where he was going, and search his house. So they've missed all these really basic investigatory steps that you would take to answer the exact question that you've asked. But this is a question that an inquest or inquiry can look into. Who did he speak to? What did intelligence know about people who were visiting him or seeing him, or the immediate danger to his life? So that's one of the reasons why we need an inquest, we need an inquiry. We can't rely on the work which is being done by the West Midlands Police, because it just isn't sufficient.
Thank you.
Avtar Singh's mother has told one of the British outlets that she suspected that he was poisoned. Do you also believe that he was probably poisoned by the Indian state agents acting on behalf of the current Indian regime? And also to the Sikh activists, do you feel more threatened, more worried after the killing of Avtar Singh and Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada? You have, I mean, I'm aware that you have previously shared your concern with the British authorities, but do you feel that under Rishi Sunak and then Priti Patel and the people in the British government were quite considered close to the Indian government? Do you think that your concerns are not being addressed and the British government is kind of being complicit in what India is doing on the British soil?
I think to answer your first question, when you look at all the evidence in this case, and you start from the moment really that his father was executed, you go from that moment, the fact that he was sent to the United Kingdom by his family because they thought he would be safe in this country, much like Alexander Litvinenko thought he'd be safe in this country as well. And then you follow it through to all the threats to him before the High Commission incident, and the threats to him after that, and all the media we've shown you where he was being targeted and his death was being celebrated as well. When you put that all together and you look at it, it looks suspicious at the very least. And all it needs to be is suspicious. It's a very low bar to get over for an inquest to be opened. So it's reason to suspect it was an unnatural death. It's a very low bar. The courts have said that before for an inquest to be opened. But when you put it all together, it's quite possible that we're looking at a Litvinenko Part 2 case here.
I think just to answer
I think it's a follow-up. There's a follow-up
yeah,
question.
just from the community, I think there's two levels to this. One was general concern that Avtar as an activist, someone from India may have been involved in eliminating and killing it on British soil. That's really hard to process for someone who's many activists are born here, educated here. We work with the government, we work with law enforcement. So for us to process that foreign government has come here and eliminated somebody and got away with it is shocking. What this case has highlighted is that if the British government are complicit in that, in covering it up, because everything that happened after Avtar died then points towards what the British government have been involved in or tried to avoid. And that is not only no medical evidence, no reach out to the community, but also refusing the mother and the daughter a visa to come and carry out the final rites themselves. Michael showed the death certificate on the slide. That death certificate was, effectively the family was blackmailed into accepting that death certificate, because the coroner was ready to issue the death certificate after about 4 days. The family rejected it via email, via call, to say, we don't accept, we want a full inquiry, we want an inquest, we want a post-mortem at the very least. They dragged that on. Then the application for the the mother and the sister for the visa was a rapid one, it's a 5-day process. They took a month to make that decision. And at the end of that month, they said, we need to see the death certificate in order to process the application. Now, the death certificate, obviously, you can only do once you define the cause of death. The coroner was contacted and said, can you issue a death certificate with the cause of death pending investigation, which is standard, pretty normal if there's an inquest or there's a further concern. The coroner refused and would not issue a death certificate. And at the same time, the Home Office was saying, we won't process this application without the death certificate. And we're now 6 weeks on Avtar's death and the body decomposition and a huge funeral that was there to plan. The decision was forced on the family to accept the death certificate as is, just to get the mother and the daughter here so they could, not only because she didn't cremate her husband, she may not even get to see and cremate her only son. The death certificate was received, sent to the Home Office. 2 days later, the Home Office refused the application. So the complicity in the cover-up is what really makes it scary for all British Sikh activists right now.
I think there was a question.
Sorry, just wanted to confirm, who is instructing you?
In this matter,
Yeah.
I'm acting directly on behalf of the family.
The sister and the mother
Yes.
in India?
Yes.
Okay, great. And also, is it correct, do you still represent Mehul Choksi?
I do, yes.
Yeah, I thought you were the same person. So I just wanted to ask, what was the actual reason given why there was no inquest and no autopsy?
So
What was the actual reason?
the documents we have from the coroner simply say that West Midlands Police have concluded it's not mysterious or it's not an unnatural death. And you've heard about the length.
So the police gets to decide?
The police have told the coroner that, and she decided based on that there was no suspicion in relation to this.
And that meant no inquest?
And that means no
But
inquest.
can you not have an autopsy even if you don't have an inquest?
In regards to the post-mortem procedure, as has been explained to you by Jazz here, there was a request for a private post-mortem to take place, and there were steps were put in place which made that very difficult. The freezing of the body, not wanting to host the body in the hospital where it was, forcing the family to find somewhere else to take it. So there are all these hurdles which were put in place, which the inquest or inquiry will have to look into. But it's not for, in English law, it's not for families to have to investigate their own loved ones' deaths.
Yeah,
It's not for the family to have to do it.
How
The
come
question
a
goes
non-private
directly.
post-mortem didn't happen?
Excuse me.
How come they didn't do one that wasn't private, just did?
A public one.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't know
They
that.
just refused.
They just refused,
Yeah.
based on the West Midlands Police
The coroner's written English was, I don't feel need for it.
for the post-mortem.
Yeah.
So you actually need permission for that from the coroner.
Yeah.
And so you've now requested an inquest from the chief coroner.
Yes.
What's the process now? How long does it take for them to reply? What are the options that might happen now?
So there's no set process in regards to timings.
Yeah.
Under section 3, the chief coroner has the power to order an inquest and to order it to take place in a different area. From hearing what we're saying today, both from me and from the community, you now understand why we don't think the West Midlands coroner should be given this task, because if there's going to be criticism potentially of the way things were carried out, the West Midlands coroner may be an interested party to the actual inquest or inquiry. So it needs to go to a different area, and it needs to have a different investigatory police force. It can't be the West Midlands Police investigating it because of the lack of trust from the Sikh community and the West Midlands Police Force. And coming back to the same point, they may be interested parties if they're going to be criticised by the inquest or inquiry for the way they carried out things, and therefore to have them investigating for the inquest or the inquiry at the same time as being one of the parties would be improper. So we think the whole thing needs to be moved, both the investigation of it and the inquest and inquiry needs to come to a different area. A senior judge needs to be appointed. Therefore, if it turns into a public inquiry, the whole thing can continue with a senior judge sitting.
And what happens now? Does the chief coroner just make a decision, yes or no?
Yes, so we should receive a decision from the chief coroner. We've provided all the evidence you've heard today. And as I've said, the bar is very low to order an inquest. We say there is suspicion here.
And you don't know how long it will take to get the
We don't know how long it will take. Of course, we want to give a fair opportunity for the chief coroner to have a look at things. He may not know about the case at all.
You've sent all the evidence.
Yes, we've written to them today. And you mentioned the Choksi case when you asked questions there. I think it's important to answer a question on that. In the Trotsy case, Mehul Trotsy was abducted from Antigua and taken to Dominica in an attempt to unlawfully render him back to India. And in this case, there is evidence, and strong evidence, that the gang involved was British residents gang, some British nationals and others who were just residents of the United Kingdom. We've provided evidence to the National Crime Agency about that operation. We've provided evidence to West Midlands Police about those members of the gang who come from the Birmingham area. So not only were they on notice from the Indian authorities about Avtar, from the community about what was going on, they're also on notice from us that this was going on in the United Kingdom. And you start with kidnappings and you end up with much more serious cases such as this one and such as the Canadian, what's happened in Canada.
Michael, just one small thing to add. So even when it came to a private autopsy, it's just a fact that when pathologists were approached, hardly anyone wanted to touch the case, which aroused more suspicion in the community. Why doesn't the pathologist want to carry out an autopsy in this particular case? And it goes back to what you said, Daz, that the word poison actually didn't come from the Sikh community. It actually came via social media and the Indian press that it had been poisoned almost within 24 hours. So, given there were others that saying he'd been poisoned, a lot of the pathologists were probably picking up all this because it was there. If you're going to take on a case, you know, so that is a really important thing to realise, that the community actually struggled to find a pathologist, and when they did, those hurdles were there that Chaz has already touched on.
Do you have any other questions from the room?
I've just got one other question. I don't know if you're able to answer, but are you able to finally explain whether he was at the protest on March the 19th?
I think it's very clearly Westminster Police confirmed he was not involved, he was not arrested, he was not detained, he was never questioned for any of the incident. Avtar himself was there on the 22nd of March in the mask protest and stood in front of the High Commission and said, I have no issue with you. I didn't take your flag down. I'm here. And that was filmed.
You don't think he was there on the 19th?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
It wasn't in any of the 45 photographs. That, yeah.
And just a quick clarification from me as well. On the video that you showed, was that cropped short? Did it continue? Just because you didn't, it said a number of people have been killed or a number of people have died, and it mentioned Nijat, but in the video that you guys played and that I've seen on Twitter, it doesn't actually sit.
It is clipped, but I think we've got the original. We can send the original.
Okay.
So you can see
Does it, and what it explicitly mentions the.
It goes on and
Avtar's.
repeats a lot of it, yeah.
But it mentions Avtar's name as someone who was killed.
It's got his picture on there.
No, but I thought it said he's on the list, and then it says in recent days at the end, a number of people have been killed, and mentions, and it shows Nijat's photo. But
Avtar's was first. First Avtar comes up. First Banjit Singh Banjwad comes up.
okay.
Then Avtar, then Nijat, and then sort of clip out at the end. But we can send on.
Sure.
And the 20 doesn't include any of them. 20 were additional saying these have been killed.
Yeah.
20 more.
Oh, I see.
Oh, sorry, did he die? Because you mentioned Sandwell Hospital and Birmingham City.
He was admitted into Sandwell
Yeah.
when he first went in unwell, and then Sandwell transferred into City.
Okay.
Are there any more questions from the room?
Just to get on the videos, because I haven't come across it on social media at all. What was the source for that? Like what?
The two videos we've played come from Indian press.
So it's Ajtak, so it's a major
Yeah.
news outlet in India. They were playing this, and one of the named 20 was watching it at home,
Right.
and his picture came up. So the thing was recorded, and then it's
And is that like a government affiliated media or just a?
I believe it's got very close link. They are very quick to report stuff that goes on with the Indian government.
Thank you. Unless there are any further questions in the room, I might see, are there any questions online?
They're all in relation to the recording.
Okay. And all right. Well, thank you all for coming today. It's obviously a very important case. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to hang around and ask them. If you want any of the evidence that we've shown today, you can have it, and we hope to have updates for you as soon as possible. But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.